At this point, Wordle is pretty much a household name, with millions of people playing it all over the world. But what if I told you that anyone in Latvia, born before 2005 and even remotely familiar with computers, would look at Wordle and say, oh, it's like Lingo, but in English? How is it that a country with fewer people than Chicago had a game like Wordle way back in 1995? Why does everyone in Latvia know about it? And how, 25 years later, Wordle came along and took the world by storm? Let's start with how Wordle blew up, and then rewind the clock to uncover how Latvia got there first. Wordle was made by Josh Wardle and released in 2021. The name Wordle is a pretty clever wordplay on his last name. Origins of the game can be dated back to 2013, and Wordle was actually not the first name idea for his game.
I was gonna call Wordle Mr. Bug's Wordy Nugs.
And we can only speculate whether the success of this game would have been the same if the title hadn't changed somewhere along the way. This is by no means the only viral creative project of Josh Wardle. While working at Reddit, he was also responsible for projects like The Button in 2015 and Place in 2017, the latter of which was still popular in 2023 and serves as a remarkable example of how people on the internet can coordinate themselves as a community. Wordle originally was a hobby project for Josh to play with his partner. In the first versions, it was an endless game with 3 lives and obscene amount of words, around 13,000 5-letter words, which over time was scaled down to a more manageable 2,500 word list. After this, the project was left to sit in a corner for around 6 years. Then came everyone's favorite pandemic of the last decade.
It comes from China.
And in 2021, Wordle was launched on the web. It was still just for convenience's sake, so that Josh could play the game with his partner. There was no intentional marketing campaign or anything like that. For a few months after the game was published on the web, it was still just 2 of them playing. After that, Josh shared the game with his family and friends. And then it snowballed. From 90 players on November 1st, 2021, to over 2 million players in mid-January. A completely viral hit that by the end of January was sold to the New York Times for no less than
$1 million.
Or to be more accurate, Wordle was acquired for an undisclosed price in the low 7 figures. As it was never Josh's intention to run a gaming company and to think about how to monetize the game, it was an easy and clear decision for him to close the deal, as he understood very well that due to the extreme popularity, Wordle will be monetized one way or another. This deal was the perfect opportunity to take his cut, step away and move on to the next project, because his passion was always more about creating new things and less about running a business. As for the New York Times, this deal was a goldmine for the newspaper. Their webpage visitor count soared, digital subscriptions skyrocketed, and revenue from app stores increased dramatically. Even with very modest estimations, they earned tens of millions of dollars by acquiring Wordle. The story of Lingo begins quite differently, and we have to go way back to the mid-80s Latvia, when it was still part of the USSR. Raimons Rudmanis, a student who was learning applied mathematics in the University of Latvia, persuaded his dad to travel from Riga to Moscow in order to purchase his first computer, BK0010, made by the company Electronic. It was impossible to purchase something this high-tech in Riga at the time, and the cost of such purchase was around 3 average monthly salaries. This paved the way for Raimons to continue learning about computers and tinker. In the mid-90s, Raimons wanted to learn to program for, at the time, revolutionary Windows 95 system. As a training exercise, he made his first game called Karoks, which means flag in Latvian. This game was made by replicating the instructions of a pen and paper game which was published in a Latvian newspaper, Atpūta. Later, it turned out this was very similar to the popular board game Stratego, which was itself a slightly modified copy of the French game
L'attaque,
meaning the attack. The idea to make Lingo, Raimons got while staying in a hotel on a business trip. He saw a TV show named Lingo, which had pretty much the same rules. In an interview, he says he doesn't even remember the country, but a quick search confirms this was most likely Netherlands, where the show was quite popular. He did not worry too much about copyright, as this was meant to be a hobby project, and a few days later, Lingo, the historic Latvian computer game, was born. Now he only had to get a database of Latvian 5-letter nouns, which happened to be quite easy, as at the time he was developing a spell checker for Latvian language, which would be used in a local software suite called Tildes Birojas. So Raimons just chose 999 words from the list, quickly checked if there were none really obscure ones, and voila, the game was finished. But now comes the tricky part. How this small coding exercise hobby project became a household name for hundreds of thousands of Latvians? Well, this is where we have to go back to the software suite Tildes Birojas. The mid-90s was a time when computers were starting to become wildly available in Latvia, and that created a new problem. There was no infrastructure for Latvian language to be used on these computers. So the company Tilde made everything from the ground up. They made specialized fonts and virtual keyboards to account for all the glorious Latvian letters like A, U, Š, Č or K. They also made software for translation, spell error checking and accounting. So anyone who wanted to use a computer in Latvia in the mid-90s, all schools and public sector companies, everyone who needed to use Latvian language on a computer pretty much needed to have Tildes Birojas software installed. But where does Lingo come in all of this utility software nonsense? Well, you see, the co-founder of Tilde, Andrejs Vasiljevs, was a classmate and fellow student of Raimons. Andrejs had the idea to add some entertainment element to the software, and his friend Raimons told him about his hobby project game development. And so, in 1995, both Lingo and Karoks were added to the software. Karoks to develop logical thinking, and Lingo to improve vocabulary. So that's how Lingo was by default part of basically any computer in Latvia for a long time. As internet connection was still not very widespread, these two games, Lingo and Karoks, were the only ones on most computers. And people, of course, played the heck out of these games. Most users were even completely convinced that Lingo came as a part of Microsoft Windows software by default. This cemented Lingo's part in Latvian computer game history, and this is why it's still remembered fondly by hundreds of thousands of people. Core gameplay in both titles, as one already might suggest, has a pretty similar outline. You get a limited number of tries to decipher a string of characters, and after each guess, you get hints of the characters and their positions. And the concept itself is not that new either, and existed long before both of these games. Raimons got the inspiration for Lingo from the Dutch TV show called also Lingo, which was a spin-off of the US TV show, which first aired in 1987. And they share notable similarities to the 1970 game called Mastermind, which resembles the pencil and paper game Bulls and Cows, which has the same elements as the 1955 pen and paper game Jotto. So how come that only one of these games was able to generate tens of millions of dollars in profit? As always, the devil is hiding in the details, seemingly small differences that sent Wordle into the stratosphere. First of all, there is the UI, which provides quality of life improvements like the visualization of keyboard under the letter grid, where it's easy for the player to visually check which letters have been already used and which not. While playing Lingo, I always had to use a separate notepad, document or pen and paper to write down already used letters. Of course, Wordle also looks more presentable, as visual design has quite evolved since the 90s. First actual gameplay difference is that the first letter of each word is always presented in Lingo, but you only get 5 tries to guess the word, not 6 guesses like in Wordle. In Lingo, the player can input any random string of 5 characters. In Wordle, each guess has to be a real word from the word list. This allows the players to fish for specific characters more easily in Lingo. Next big difference is how players interact with the game. Lingo is a program that's locally installed on your computer, and the idea is that you play until you lose. You start with 3 lives, similar as in early Wordle prototypes, and lose a life each time you don't guess the word with 5 tries. It's an endless loop of guessing words, and as soon as you end one game, you're free to start the next. Wordle, on the other hand, was originally placed on a simple web page. Afterwards, of course, there inevitably came the mobile app and other ways to engage with the game. But I think that regarding gameplay, the biggest reason of the big rise in popularity was due to the genius decision of allowing the player to guess only one word each day. This provides the feeling of scarcity. The player is hooked by the simple and engaging loop of guessing a word. Just as he gets the satisfaction of guessing the right word or the frustration of not managing the right guess, the player is left hanging and longing for more. You have to spend the whole day wondering what the next word will be and will you be able to solve it and how many tries it will take you. And this last part is what made Wordle take a parabolic trajectory in popularity. You see, as Lingo was installed locally, and when it came out wide access to the internet was still far from reality, the only way to compete was locally, and players did this with local high scores. By correctly guessing a word, you get a certain amount of points, 2 points if you get the word right with the last guess, and 10 points and an extra life if you get it right with the first guess. So when you run out of lives and the game ends, if you managed to get enough points to reach the leaderboard, you could enter your name and see how well other people on this computer did. Being somewhat of a Lingo connoisseur myself, I once pushed this high score to the limit. In my college dorm, we spent a good few days without turning off my PC and grinding Lingo, which ended in a high score of over 2000 points. The game ended just because computer had to be turned off at one point, and of course there is no implemented way to save the game, because no sane person would need such a feature. But going back to Wordle, as there is only one word per day, there must be another way to compete with others. And another way there was. A random group of friends started sharing their each day's result with an emoji grid, so other players can see how fast you were able to solve the puzzle without getting any spoilers for the daily word. And I think that because Josh implemented this feature right into the game, the simple ability to share your result via Twitter as an emoji grid was a crucial element of making Wordle the viral hit it is. Both of these games were made without the initial motivation to earn tons of money out of it. For Lingo, it was learning to code, and for Wordle, it was to have a fun experience with your loved ones. And although they did get the popularity on widely different time periods, different scales, and for seemingly different reasons, if you peel it back, layer by layer, some of the reasons are more similar than it initially looks like. When I look back on the times I played Lingo, it was rarely just me sitting alone in front of my computer and grinding Lingo. Whether it was in the computer class in school, having fun with my classmates during the time we were supposed to learn word art and changing fonts, at home trying to be the high score of my family members, or even so many years later in my college dorm, drowning in nostalgia together with my study pals and roommates. It mostly always was some kind of social activity that Lingo was simply a part of. And I see the same with Wordle. Of course, there is the rush of guessing the right word, but are you really waiting for the next day to try and guess the word, or you're more interested in sharing your results with your friends and seeing who did better? There can be different motivations of that, I'm sure, but the importance of these simple social interactions cannot be undermined. And engineering these simple, engaging social interactions is also harder than it looks. A game studio can spend tens, even hundreds of millions of dollars while making a shallow, flashy experience, with the sole purpose of making profit, and flop completely afterwards. While even one person with enough passion and the right circumstances can create something that brings together millions of players, and I really love to see that. I love to see that creativity and fresh ideas from indie developers can thrive and even surpass the quadruple A content pumped out by billion-dollar studios. I love to see that the industry is not getting monopolized and the small guy still has the chance to make it big. And that helps to evolve the game development scene forward and continue to innovate. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are there any Lingo or Wordle type of games that were popular locally where you are from? And if you made it this far in the video, I truly thank you for your time. If you enjoyed the video, I would greatly appreciate it if you left a like or a dislike if you didn't enjoy it. And leave a comment if there are other things you like or dislike about any of these games, or if you would like to see more content in similar fashion. Stay safe and bye for now.